right, who's too high? I'm going to start at the top and work down with who I had. I thought the Rams at 8 is a little too high for me. Just considering who's behind them. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I think they are probably, still put them as the class of the NFC West. I just think 8 when you're ahead of the Buccaneers, who I think got better this offseason, ahead of the Broncos, who I think got better, ahead of the Vikings at 13. I'd probably put them behind all of those teams. So that's a little too high for me. And I worry about this secondary. I know they do everything in their power. If you watch this defense on the All-22, they play the least amount of man coverage in the NFL. They treat their corners like glorified linebackers with the zones they have them covered. They're running back deep into coverage. Like, it's a uniquely set up defense to protect those corners. But their corners are still a 32-year-old Darius Williams, a 30-year-old Ahkello Witherspoon, and then Quentin Lake. It's a bottom 3 group in the NFL. We're just ranking up cornerback groups. And again, they protect them very well. They get a lot of run out of their defensive line, but I worry about that. And then I just worry about age offensively. Your star quarterback's 37. Your star wide receiver in Devontae Adams, they just signed, is 32. Your right tackle is 33 in Rob Havenstein. And then your sort of second wave, your backups, you don't have the depth that you did last year along the offensive line. It is just that first starting unit. And if anyone goes down, and a lot of guys went down last year, I just worry about how thin they are up front. So for all those reasons, Rams are a good team. I just don't think they're the 8th best team in the NFL. Next team up, Atlanta Falcons. 16. They come in at Pete Prisco's power rankings. I think that's I can be talked into that, but I have serious question marks about where they got better. I know the quarterback position, Michael Penix Jr., like that should be a lot better than it was with Kirk Cousins. But I thought they kind of got lucky to win as many games as they did with Kirk Cousins last year. Like, they got by in the seat of their pants a number of times to eke out games, specifically against the Bucs last season, where they took both those matchups. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, and I just worry wholeheartedly that this might be the worst defensive line in the NFL. You know, it's been that way for forever, but you're relying on 2 rookie first-rounders to make an impact. Your defensive line of Rook, Orororo, David Onyemata, Jalen Walker, James Pierce. I guess Leonard Floyd you can throw in there too, but at this point in his career, he has not been an impact pass rusher in years. Maybe Arnold Ebiketie takes a step forward. Maybe Braylon Trice takes a step forward. Sure, you have names, you have guys in that edge room to have potential. I don't see it on the interior, though, and you do not have depth on the interior. And it's like, if no one takes a big step forward, and if it is those 2 rookies, like if your defensive line last year, if you're relying on Laiatu Latu and Dallas Turner, who I thought were better prospects than Jalen Walker and James Pierce, the first 2 edge rushers off the board in last year's draft class. If you were relying on them to anchor your pass rush, you had a bad pass rush last year. It is difficult to be an impact pass rusher as a rookie in the NFL. The gap from college to NFL in terms of offensive tackle play is massive. You can get by being an athlete in college. You have to have a bag to get by in the NFL. I have not seen that from Pierce or Walker just yet, so I do not feel comfortable saying that they will be impact guys. So we'll see. But then also on the flip side, and again, I think Michael Penix Jr. is going to be a massive upgrade. But up front, you lost Drew Dahlman. You didn't add anyone to this offensive line. And yeah, he didn't play most of last season with Ryan Nizzle at center. But now it's like, if Ryan Nizzle goes out, who steps in for him or anyone else along that offensive line? You're just so thin that I think you're playing with fire there a little bit. 16, because of that, is just a touch too high. My last team that's too high before we get to who's too low, Miami Dolphins. Producer Harry was, I would say, none too pleased to hear this. We had a little text back and forth about it, but he's kind of like, it kind of seemed like he just knows that the writing is on the wall with this team and where they're going, unfortunately. And yeah, 24, like if they stay fully healthy and everything goes right, like I could very well be wrong about this. Their offense still should be very good. If Tyreek looks like old Tyreek, if Waddle's there, like there's no reason that the offense can't put up a lot of points still. I just have massive concerns about this defense. One, you might have the worst secondary in the NFL. If you trade Jalen Ramsey, if he's gone, your starters at corner are Storm Duck, Cam Smith, Kader Kohou. I like Kader Kohou. I like Cam Smith coming out. At no point does that cornerback trio strike any fear in opponents. And then your safety group is Ashton Davis and Afatu Melifonwu, two kind of also rans that the Jets and Lions were completely fine to get rid of this offseason. It's not an inspiring group. And then your edge group. Now, Chop Robinson, I think, is going to take a big step forward. I have full confidence in him being an impact guy. But with Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb's injury histories at this point, I think getting anything from them is a plus. I do not think you can chalk up any sort of production from either of those two coming off of Achilles, ACLs, all that. It's not great. And then obviously then you have the concern that is their offensive line, that you're banking on Jonas Avinaya being a day one competent starter at right guard, that you're banking on Patrick Paul, last year's second rounder, being a competent replacement to Teron Armstead. And then you're banking on Tua Tagovailoa going through a full season healthy. There's just so many things up in the air here for this Dolphins team that, and you just became so thin at so many different positions that I could see this team bottoming out, unfortunately, this season. Who's too low? We'll start off with a team that I think has added more talent this offseason than anyone else in the NFL. And yet they're still ranked at number 22. It's the New England Patriots. I think for so many reasons they're too low. But the biggest of which is this is just not the same team. It's a completely different team than what we saw last year. You added Carlton Davis, Robert Spillane, Milton Williams, Harold Landry to this defense. To the offense, you added Stephon Diggs, Morgan Moses, Garrett Bradbury. And then not to mention that in the draft where you added Will Campbell at left tackle, Travion Henderson at running back, Kyle Williams at wide receiver, Craig Woodson at safety, Josh Farmer at DT, Braden Swinson off the edge. Like there is so many guys that can be from this rookie draft class that can be impact day one starters. And then from your free agent class that should be impact starters. That's like, you almost can throw out last year with a different coaching staff, with completely different talent. And then, oh, by the way, Drake May going from year one to year two, which is traditionally the biggest leap a quarterback takes in his career. All of those reasons, I think not only are the Patriots better than the 22nd best team, I think they're a playoff team this upcoming season. I think a massive turnaround is in store. It really kind of hinges on this offensive line. But they hit all the needs. They hit all the right notes. Like this is a team that you look up and down and you're like, all of a sudden, oh shoot, this is good. Like this is not the same team that was walking through that door last year. And again, Mike Vrabel and his track record would give me good reason to think that a quick turnaround's in store. So 22, no, I think they're a lot better than that. Even if, 4-13 a year ago, I think this is a 10-win team this upcoming season. I truly do. Next one up, Arizona Cardinals, who check in at number 20 on these rankings. Talk about a turnaround in terms of talent. The Cardinals, beginning of last season, I think had the worst defensive line in the NFL. Your best pass rusher was Dennis Gardeck. It was so bad that you moved Zaven Collins, an off-ball linebacker you drafted in the first round. You moved him to the edge, right? It was awful. And you had your first rounder, Darius Robinson, didn't play. He came in with an injury. There just was no talent walking through that door. That has changed. And probably in the biggest way I've ever seen in a one-year turnaround in terms of what they had week one to what they're going to have week one now. Guys that weren't on their week one that are now. Baron Browning, who they traded for midseason from Denver and then re-signed. Darius Robinson, who obviously was your first rounder who was injured. Dalvin Tomlinson on the interior defensive tackle. Calais Campbell, interior defensive tackle. Walter Nolan. Josh Sweat. BJ Ojulari, who was injured last year. Jordan Birch, your third rounder. They're so much better I mean, this looks like kind of similar to what Jonathan Gannon had when he was in Philadelphia, where you had just second wave, third wave. It's not to say you have elite guys in this room. I don't think I'd put any of these guys in the top 10 of their respective positions, but you might have a bunch of guys who are top 30. You may very well have a lot of quality in this Cardinals defensive line that just, when you have 4 across of all guys that can win one-on-ones, that's what makes it tough on offense. You can't have a weak link then. And then that way you can just rush 4. So the days of going blitz heavy, scheming it up for Jonathan Gannon, I think that's turned around. And then offensively, they didn't really add much. I think this is pretty status quo from where they were a year ago. But that was a young receiving core. It was a first and second year wideout were your top 2 options, Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. Years 2 and years 3 for those guys could look better. Kyler Murray, year 2 with Marvin Harrison Jr. should be better, should be on the same page more. I don't know. I think there's a lot of reason to get excited about this Cardinals team being better than the 8-9 team they were a year ago. And then lastly, I'm going to go up to all the way to number 11. I think this is a top 10 team through and through. And if I'm the rest of the AFC, I am terrified of this team. It's the Denver Broncos. They were, a year ago, the best defense in the NFL in terms of EPA per play. Better than the Eagles, better than the Vikings. They had the defensive player of the year, Pat Surtain. They had a top 3 pass rush in terms of pressures. They added to that Jahdae Barron, Talanoa Hufanga, and Dre Greenlaw. A corner, a safety, and a linebacker. Because the one place they were susceptible was their run defense. So it added a great run defender in the slot, a great run defender at safety, and a great run defender at second level at linebacker. There is reason to think that this defense could very well look like, what the Eagles defense looked like down the stretch. Just suffocating. And then you factor into that, they added a lead back with home run hitting ability. And Bo Nix year 2. He will be better. Rookie to year 2, the biggest jump any quarterback makes. All those things for a team that was 10-7 already a year ago. A blocked field goal from going 11-7, beating the Chiefs. I think this is a top 10 team. I would put them at least above the Chargers. I think the Chargers took a step back from a talent perspective. I think the Broncos are taking a step forward. And I'd be very afraid if I was the rest of the AFC. All right, who's just right? 3 teams. We don't have to spend too long on them because obviously I'm agreeing with Pete, so I don't want to spend too long on them. But I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at number 9 as just right. This is a team, maybe not even just right. I said I'd put them above the Rams, but this is a firm top 10 team that Jason Light, you just have to give him his flowers as one of the best GMs in the NFL. Every single year continues to maintain, bringing back Chris Godwin to this receiving core, adding Emeka Egbuka to the draft. Yeah, you lost Liam Cohen. That's going to hurt. But it's almost like you foolproofed it by getting into Emeka Egbuka, where now you go 6 deep at receiver of quality options. You just can funnel those guys in and out. If Chris Godwin goes down, if he's not fully healthy, it ain't no problem. You have a top 5 offensive line in the NFL. You have Bucky Irving running behind it, who was so dynamic. And I think now that you go into the season knowing who he is, you can do a lot more with him than kind of going into last season thinking Rachaad White was your guy. No, you scheme this, you make this offense, you create it around Bucky Irving now and what he's capable of. And then you add it to your defensive line, Hassan Reddick, David Walker, Elijah Roberts in the draft. I think there's reason to believe this defensive line could take a big step forward. I still worry about the linebacking core. Levante David, at 35 years old, can he keep going? Who knows? We'll see. But I do think that this Bucs team is the real deal. Just from a talent perspective, they are the real deal. The next one I want to hit on here, we'll go down the board. 18, Dallas Cowboys. I actually thought for a second to put them too high, but this is where they are, and it's still the outside looking in. That's why I just can't believe their offseason. That was about as status quo an offseason as you can get in a division where it's an arms race at this point. You saw what the Giants did this offseason. You saw what the Commanders did this offseason. And the Commanders were already a better team. And obviously they're in a different cap situation, but like the Cowboys didn't take a step forward. They were a 7-10 team a year ago. They are staring dead in the face 7-10 again. This is a team that has holes. This is a team that does not have weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb. And it's a team that unfortunately just isn't that good on paper and doesn't have a head coach that's going to inspire me as an offensive mind that's going to like really innovate in a way to get this team play above their talent level. So they weren't a playoff team a year ago. Coming in at 18 here, I just would be floored if they get their way in the playoffs. It's the division got harder. Didn't get easier. It got harder in the NFC East. Last team, number 3 on the teams ranked just right, Tennessee Titans. Unfortunately, they still have the worst roster in the NFL. This was the cupboard that John Robinson left with his just utter disastrous drafts. After they got that number 1 seed, they just started just drafting like shit. I mean, there's no way around it. Isaiah Wilson, Caleb Farley, Treylon Burks, just not hitting. And when you go through, an entire rookie contract's worth of misses, 4 straight years of not getting production, your best pick over that span, Peter Skoronski, a guard, who's like, an average to above average guard, but that's your best pick. What are you going to do? Like unless you really hit on free agents, which they objectively did not last year on their spending spree, you are going to be a bad team. And they went on another spending spree this offseason. I don't know if Dan Moore is exciting me, and you're starting a rookie quarterback. So for all those reasons, the Titans are still really on the outside looking in at contending, which hurts to say because I love Cam Ward in his game, but it's not as if he's, as far as number 1 overall picks go, like Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence or Bryce Young. Like, it could be Bryce Young, right? It could be Caleb Williams. It's like where I worry about is that just like there are some things to his game that need to improve. And I don't know if he's going to a situation where it's going to necessarily maximize his strengths and hide his weaknesses. I worry for this Titans team. And again, when you're starting a rookie quarterback, sometimes it's just not good right away.